and the Finnish through this kind of work have mastered that art. So I think it's, we sort of aren't taking advantage of what's been out there for years and trying to reinvent the wheel and create things that are new and different. But I think this is foundationally sound. And the way you presented it, numbered it, alphabetized things from using the ice surface and into the types of tactical situations and numbers, it's just brilliant. So I'm going to spend a little more time uh, promoting that and seeing if people would experiment with it. Like, for instance, Tim Taylor, have you used Tom's ABC site at all?
Oh, yes, heavens. Um, Forever. Almost since I ever started coaching, I learned of Tom, his hockey coaching ABC's website very early on when I started coaching. Um, Tom's, yeah, just a tremendous resource and shared tons of stuff with me anytime I've asked. It's yes, I've used it a lot.
Craig, you got your hand up.
Yeah. I love how this content is put out, but I'm always curious about how do we actually go about teaching it. Has anyone ever heard of the concept knowledge in the game versus knowledge of the game, or also constraints-led approach? I feel like those two are things that we're kind of circling around on how do we go and actually implement these concepts. So is anyone familiar knowledge in versus knowledge of?
No, your languaging is, we might have a different idea, but that's new languaging to me. Would you elaborate on it?
Yeah, knowledge of the game is when someone points out like, oh, look at that sweet toe drag. Knowledge in the game is like, oh, I saw the defender was leaning this way, so I knew I needed to toe drag. So knowledge that you need in the game as you're playing it versus knowledge of the game, which is, us as coaches, our bird's eye view type stuff. So how do we give reads and give environments where players are able to actually use information in the game rather than just having the concept of the game?
Okay, I'm going to try to interpret it. The way you've said it, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to give you my impression of what you meant to me. Um, Knowledge of the game is basically the skill or tactic that can be used in situations. And knowledge in the game is when to apply it. Does that make sense? In other words, you have to have the toe drag skill practiced deliberately at speed, in technically, progressively taught toe drag. But then when you play the game, the situational execution of that is the game, just the game like thinking and moment and timing. Couple that with the awareness of all the players around you as well. Does that make sense? Am I interpreting what you say properly, Craig?
Yeah, I like the first part. The second part, I may disagree with the deliberate practice on everything, and that leads into the idea of the constraints-led approach, or CLA. So rather than being deliberate on things and teaching every little detail, is how do we create environments where we have access to a lot of these reads and environments that are game-like or game realistic, and that drives more than anything else the actual skills that are being chosen. While there are times to obviously be deliberate and teach certain things to expand the player's capabilities, do we overdo it on this and maybe undersell how the environment is really the first teacher for the players, and in many cases can be the main teacher for players as they're figuring out timing and selection of when to do things, and have the ability to try, fail, try something new or slightly different, again and again. So rather than being the teacher, I have to teach this very specific skill, I'm more of creating an environment and then prodding with questions and guiding with mentorship. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Well, what if this? You had problems with this. What do you think you could do else to escape that problem or the pressure? So I think that it's great to talk about the skills of. I think we needed to figure out how do we do more in, and especially with players that may not have an outdoor rink available to them. How do we give them these reps that a lot of players got out on a rink many years ago, where you just went out and played?
Tim?
Yeah, I guess got a couple things going through my mind. There's not much for outdoor rinks here in this area, but there's a ton of rollerblading that goes on uh, in the neighborhood. I there's that. There is free play, not as much as there used to be, but there is still free play, and you don't have to have ice. Um, and then I guess the other thing, Greg, is really what you're and my context would be, you know, 13U and under. Uh, it really boils down to practice design. Everybody here knows what the typical youth practice looks like: lines, cones, scripted paths, scripted patterns, versus what we were talking about earlier with Tom's game based hockey coaching ABCs type of a practice. And Tom's said it many times before. In practice, you can take time to work on a specific skill, and then from that go into a game with a constraint, and where the kids can use the skill that they just learned and experiment with it. That's we've talked about that a bunch with this group before, and that's that's the differences that I see. And I think everybody on the call would as well. If you walked into a rink, a typical youth practice, what would you see versus what would you like to see?
Yeah, I like that, Tim. I think that roller hockey is great. I still know many players that don't play it, and they probably should, because it's such a great environment for players to learn without having to worry about taking contact. It's one of the reasons I love when I used to coach a college team, we'd put the team actually broken into two, add alumni, and put in the local adult league, and that was the best learning environment more than anything else that we ever did.
Tom, have you got any comments on what we said with Greg relative to your thinking process?
Well, you have to do all of the things, and you have them play a game sometime to create a need to know, and then you see what they're not doing well, and then you work on it. And your regular games are kind of that too, but it has to be a combination. When I started teaching 1974, the big deal was guided discovery, and that's kind of where people talk about now, where you don't really tell the kids anything, that they're supposed to discover everything. And you had to make up all kinds of things like balance yourself with two hands and your feet in the air and all this. And the kids would stand there with this puzzled look and then finally say, "Oh, you mean a handstand?" So, guided discovery has been around a long time. And I think we have to do everything. We have to play the games. We have to do transition games. We have to do direct, command style teaching where we show things, because they're not going to discover all this knowledge does not come with us when we're born and we're just bringing it up, because that's kind of what guided discovery is based on. There's the wisdom of the elders, and you also have to give the kids some guidance on things and then let them learn their own variations and sort of things like that. So it's like Tim always says, it's not always one thing or the other. It's kind of a combination of things and the right thing at the right time, like you say all the time.
Craig, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I love that idea that we're not the ones so much like what do they call it? Like the sage on the stage, more the guide on the side. Like I think that's super important. And that guided discovery is super important. I love how Tom brought that up. And how do we do that? I think it is the key nowadays. Like there's many ways to do it, but how do we as a coaching community, how do we help proliferate that into our own circles of influence? Because that's what kills me when I go into a rink is seeing, lines and we're going down the rink, then the coach talks for a minute and then we go right down the rink and we're having very limited access to skill movements rather than, for example, how do we, do it chaotically in one of the zones or half ice, or we're doing ovals if we're doing real specific technique work where I'm in the middle and I can pull out kids and other coaches can pull out kids and help guide them on their discovery journey, really.
I finally found the right link for the YouTube thing, and I'll send it to the guys I have the email address of.
Yep, send it to me, Tom. I'll send it to the masses.